Honestly, that's not the typical failure. What I typically find when they are failing is that they're real loose and rattly. It almost sounds like jingle bells. They just wobble around, so you've got this little nut that sits on the end of here. You'll pull a transmission out and this will be gone.
So Sean, tell us a little bit about the truth and the realities on this. There's so much crap on the internet about these cars.
If you read it, people get scared. And I get phone calls every day. I'm looking at buying one of these cars. What do they, what's the pros and cons? And the first question I get asked is that, the first question I'll ask is, do you have any records? Does it have any records of an IMS bearing being done? What's an IMS bearing? That's usually the response that I get when I ask that question to a customer who's looking to buy a used Boxster or a used 911 of this generation car. And I tell them as politely as I can, go on the internet and Google Porsche IMS. Yeah. And I warn them that there's a lot to read and you can get real scared real fast.
So what cars are affected?
So any car that Porsche water cooled from 1997 through 2008. Okay. So what that does, that covers a large generation of Porsche engines. One of the reasons why we have the engine out is we're going to inspect the VarioCam chain guides, and those two chains make it the 5-chain motor. So, but the bearing itself sits here behind this flange. You can usually, once the transmission's off, there's a lot of hoopla out there about what year, what had what, where's the engine number split and everything like that. Pretty much rule of thumb is everything up to about 01 had a dual row in it. The only time that you're going to have that iffy number is at 02 Boxter S is into 03s. I've seen maybe one 5-chain motor that had a single row in it. Doesn't make any bad or worse. It's just it was the flange design when they were incorporated it
like any company, they were using stuff up and then would go to the
next they were not going to leave a bunch of these sitting on the shelf and then and it's not like Porsche put them in. It's the engine cases and everything come from a manufacturer with parts in hand to assemble.
This is one you had laying around that you've taken out of a customer's car. This one's just frozen.
It's locked up solid. You can't spin it at all.
And is that the typical failure, or
honestly, that's not the typical failure. What I typically find when they are failing is that they're real loose and rattly. It almost sounds like jingle bells. They just wobble around, so you've got this little nut that sits on the end of here. You'll pull a transmission out, and this will be gone, or just laying down in the bell housing, and this whole piece breaks off here, because if you notice, it narrows up pretty good at that neck. Yeah. So as this thing starts to seize, it's not going to stop this engine from running. So what's the first thing to go? The stationary piece, and it just breaks this off. Oh. Now, lots of cars, when I was working at the dealership, kind of come in and they heard this noise. It says ding, 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 ding in the bell housing with the engine running. And this was really early on before we found why these were happening. These cars were under warranty. We weren't allowed to look at them. Porsche wanted that motor back. We weren't allowed to tear into them at all. And obviously, as the internet is, one person finds out, the whole world knows. Yeah. So, and this is where we're at. So yes, an IMS failure can be catastrophic. Is your car susceptible to it? Most of the experts, people probably smarter than I am, people work at Porsche, people work at Ellen Engineering, they're averaging 1 in 10, 1 in 12. It's a roll of the dice. It could be, if this fails, you might have to put a new engine in or rebuild your engine if it's rebuildable. You're talking about thousands of dollars, $10, $12, $15,000. And most of these cars running around with these old style bearings, 97 to 99 Boxsters, they're not worth $12,000. The retail on a 97 Boxster is only about $8,500.
So despite all the fear, once you have the engine out, this is not a very difficult job. It's quite simple.
Yes, it is and it isn't. I wouldn't give this job to a layman weekender wrench turner. There are special tools involved, especially now that we're gonna cover this IMS solution that L&N Engineering provides. Yell Engineering has been doing this for years. They're the first company to come up with the solution to a bad IMS bearing. Now this permanent solution, as you notice, it says IMS solution. Doesn't say IMS bearing anywhere on it. That's because it's technically not a bearing anymore. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna replace this piece that has ball bearings in it with basically an oil-fed bushing. So this is a much tougher design. This is actually what Porsche used in all the air-cooled motors. All the air-cooled motors had an intermediate shaft as well, and I get people asking me all the time, well, why didn't they have failures? Well, they didn't have an oil bath ball bearing spinning around in the motor. They actually had, it was basically this. And what this is gonna do is that this gets pressed into the IMS shaft itself in there, and then we've got a piece that comes in. That's the spindle piece. You got a much larger flange now, and what that does, it's got an oil port in it here. This oil line feeds into the oil port, and then you have an oil line that comes off the oil filter manifold and goes in and supplies oil pressure to the bearing. There's a little hole right there so that when the engine's running, this spins on this under an oil fed, just like a rod bearing or a main bearing in an engine. Now you've got a layer of oil that this rides on now, and you're not being hindered by a ball bearing.
So the failure rate's essentially zero if you replace
This is
all
a
this.
permanent solution. Never have to go back and do it again. L&N does tell you, they're very upfront about it, if you put one of their standard ball bearings in. Now their ball bearings are much better than what Porsche supplies, and especially with this design, if you have a later model that has a single row, L&N has designed a hybrid dual row with ceramic ball bearings in it. Take a lot higher load. They'll go a lot longer. If it doesn't have oil on it, they go a lot further without galling. Their standard dual row for this particular engine, they say you still be replaced every 50 or 60,000 miles.
Support brands that support classic motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.